Welcome in, Utah fans, to Voices from the Cheap Seats UteZone podcast. As always, we are here to bring you new perspectives, new learnings, new ideas from some of the voices that are prevalent and active in college sports and that pertain to the University of Utah. I am really excited about the guests that we have in today. We have Dan Furman. If you're not following him on X, you should be. But Dan Furman, he's a college sports business consultant. He's one of the most experienced voices on NIL, and there are few people in the industry that know more about the machinations of NIL, how it works, what schools are doing, and really what the landscape looks like than Dan. So Dan, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
I appreciate that, Dan. You got a great name, and appreciate you having me. I'm glad to jump on, and always I love following what you guys are doing, and ultimately, I'm a big believer in the success across Power 4 sports, so I love following Utah as well.
Love it. Well, Dan, just to kind of level set, help our listeners understand a little bit more about who you are, how you got to have this expertise when it comes to NIL, and what you do in the space.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's now a loaded question because of how complex NIL has become, right? So probably over the last 10 years, I've been really heavy of trying to stamp put my feet down in the college athletics landscape. And over that time, things have changed so much that I've had to pivot, adjust, make changes to my career path and figure out what's next for me. Right. And I started out working and I actually played baseball at Pittsburgh and then transitioned to an ACC internship where I lived down in Greensboro and had the opportunity to work for some unbelievable people and got experience on, what is now the championships and operations side, right? So you see the nuts and bolts of what college sports is all about. It's not all about the money. It's not all about the business aspect. It's about the actual student athlete experience. And that kind of made me fall in love with college sports from a sense of, I'm seeing like the true competition of how these kids, the amount of time and effort and emotion that goes into actually putting what their hard work is behind the scenes on the field, on the court. And that was always exciting to me, right? I loved that environment, but also knew at the time I wanted to be an athletic director, right? So I wanted to transition, work on the business side and understand a little bit of the broader landscape of how money and power were shaping college sports at the time. And for me, everybody that I was talking to at that point in time, you got to go into fundraising, development. So I actually took a job in development. Michael Dudas, who runs the Cardinal Athletic Fund at the University of Louisville, is now the deputy AD, oversees majority of external operations here at Louisville. Hired me with Vince Tyree at the time. It was the athletic director to work in fundraising. And man, I learned to grind it out. I was pulling onto campus for my first day of work, and they had a crane on the side of the stadium pulling the Papa John's logo off the stadium. So we'd seen a lot. I'd seen it all. Been through the ups and downs. It was shortly thereafter the FBI investigation in 2017 and some other things that came down the pipeline, including some vacating the championship, and the fan base was a little bit fractured, right? But the group of us took it upon ourselves of like, hey man, we're going to be really good at what we do, and now is the best time to go ask people for money. There's emotion. We need them. Like we need these people to continue to support the school and to support Louisville. And fast forward about 5 years from then, I had kind of outgrown my position in fundraising, started to get to the point where I wanted to jump into a senior leadership role in the department. And Michael came to me and was like, hey man, I think you should consider going to run the collective. So I went out, took a little bit of a chance on myself. We started 502 Circle with $12,000 in a bank account. And myself and Mark Spiegel had a heck of a run at it for about 4 years, where we just day to day tried to figure this thing out. College athletics has changed so much. Like my first day on that job, I was dropping off a bag of $5,000 in a Ziploc bag for a kid to sit on a Maserati for 2 hours, and now it's turned into full-blown player contracts. There's deductions. There's almost like real life roster management, almost like a video game as you go through this process because of how volatile it is. But really, when you break it down, it turned into a pro environment really fast. So I got real life experience and kind of got my hard knocks of learning the hard way on how this thing works and how NIL builds rosters. And we've been really fortunate where now I have the opportunity to oversee the cap space for football and men's basketball, along with Michael on the university side. And we've had a lot of success at Louisville, right? So I've had that experience in that space, but then get to branch out a little bit, consult, work with some other schools on how to maximize their financials, how to make sure that they're in the right spot to go generate opportunities for their athletes on the NIL side. And man, it's been a blast. It's been a total wild ride. But we're just like everybody else in this industry. I always say, man, I wake up every day just trying to figure it out. If you think you know it all, you're probably going to get smoked. So just trying to figure it out like everybody else in this space. And hopefully we know a little bit more day in, day out.
I love it. From your perspective, what's the biggest misconception that fans have about NIL and how it works?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that a lot of people think that the NIL market is like this black market. But it's really professionalized itself over the last few years. And with rev share and NIL Go and different opportunities for athletes from school to school, everybody has money now, right? Every Power 4 school is working with $20.5 million plus whatever they're doing outside of the cap. And for a lot of schools, they have the ability to retain and add players to their roster that I think could be really valuable to their department. So these aren't made up numbers anymore. There's true market value to each of these athletes as they come through the pipeline and the system, and GMs and player personnel staffs across the country are trying to figure out, hey, where are the diamonds in the rough, and who really provides me value to build a roster that, quite frankly, can compete at the top level of the Big 12, the Big 10, or the ACC or SEC. And that's the constant battle that people in our space are trying to figure out, is when is enough enough. But when you look at these billion-dollar institutions that are public universities, we started at zero, so it seems like a lot. But realistically, are these player salaries insane? I think the answer for a lot of people when you compartmentalize that is no, they're not. So I don't see there being an end in sight. And I think that the space is just going to become more and more professional, especially as the ante keeps being upped. And competing at the highest levels of college football and men's basketball are extremely important to the lifeblood of communities and athletic departments around the country.
We've seen, look, there's definitely an arms race going on, and you see those numbers, they keep going up. And yeah, every school's got the revenue share that comes from the House settlement that they're going to distribute. A lot of these numbers that we're seeing when you see, teams like Texas, LSU, they're talking about them being 30 in excess of million, 40 million a year and what they're doing. Is there an end to this arms race? Is there, and frankly, what does this mean for, schools like a Utah or a Baylor or a Kansas that, they have money to spend, but they're not going to spend $40 million on a football roster to try to get themselves a championship. So would love your take on all of that.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, but I think there's a variety of ways you could look at it, right? I think there's part sentiment that they're not going to spend the money, and I think that, I would almost challenge, I think they will, right? I think it's going to become that competitive in the market, just like facilities were 10 years ago. Everybody just kept getting bigger, better, shinier facilities to recruit and retain the best athletes in the country. I think that you'll continue to see investments in player salaries and opportunities to provide athletes unique third-party opportunities to market themselves. And I think I don't see it stopping anytime soon. College athletics always works on a 3 to 5 year cycle. So historically, those are where we see our trends. Every 3 to 5 years, you see a lot of shuffle and a lot of flip. And we're probably I would say, a year and a half into this thing. About 6 months prior to the House settlement passing, a lot of schools started to really prepare going into that opportunity for them to provide athletes $20.5 million. And we're really getting to a point where we're going to start to see some shuffle here going into, in my opinion, year 2 and year 3, where there's going to be real solidified change or opportunities for us to really segment the market in college sports to say, hey, enough's enough. These are the regulations, and this is how this is going to work. Because at some point, I'm not going to say that it's going to stop. I just think at some point everybody's going to run out of gas. Universities are already taxed more than they've ever been. You're seeing a widespread panic across the board when it comes to admissions. and application rates going down from school to school. The one combat you have for that is your front porch, and that's college athletics. So how do you blend the two to make sure you're putting a really qualified marketing tool out there to the public to be able to compete with some of the biggest universities in the country? And in my opinion, you have Utah, you have Baylor, you have Louisville. Like, those programs have to punch above their weight a little bit. And that's why I love reading about Durazio and how they're working, some of the GM side of the football aspect. It's not easy. And you may not have as much money as everybody else, but that doesn't mean that you have to compete on a lesser level. And, I've always taken the approach in more of a cap and GM role that it's not about spending the most amount of money. It's having the highest value roster. So you have to understand the ins and outs of where you can get data plays, where you can get guys that provide more value and help you punch above your weight. A lot of schools are now transitioning into a model where you're paying 52 to 56 guys. There's not, the old Clemson model of 75 to 110 guys being paid every year. Texas Tech did that for a little while of paying every guy X amount of dollars on the roster. I don't see that. I don't foresee that being a long-standing thing. And that's where schools like Utah are able to punch above their weight and be a little bit more strategic with how they're spending their money, not just spending the most when it comes to competing in the conference.
Yeah, kind of continuing on from what you were just talking about, Utah in specific, we're seeing a couple of things. Number one, they have the Otro Capital private equity deal that they've done. They've created this Utah Business Partners entity where they're bringing in professionals to help not only just help athletics market themselves and to drive better business development relationships, better sponsorship relationships with corporations in the community, but part of that, what they'll be tasked with is drumming up new opportunities for third-party NIL deals that will have to go through NIL Go and that sort of thing. So Utah's taking that approach in addition to whatever they're doing with the house settlement funds. And then, of course, like you mentioned with Joe Durazio, where they're, I hate using the word Moneyball, but I mean, that's what it really is the Moneyball type approach where Utah talks about looking at the value of the NIL package over the course of 4 years rather than the first year on campus, that they pay for production. If you see the field, you're going to make a lot of money at Utah. Just so they've got kind of a different philosophy and strategy than what we're seeing with the schools that are making the biggest headlines, like at the LSUs and Texas Techs of the world. I'd love to get your take on that approach, what the positives of that might be, and what maybe some of the pitfalls might be that Utah should be looking out for.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to both sides of it, right? And I look at an LSU, you look at an Ole Miss, what they've done over the last few years, and quite frankly, you look at a little bit of what Louisville's done, right? And you market and brand yourself to compete at the highest level because you have the cash to do it. And there's schools that want to play in that game, and then there's schools similar to Utah who I think that Utah is in a situation where they know what they want and they know what they attract, right? And I think that's really important for everybody in this game is understanding who you are, understanding what players fit your system, understanding who you're going to get value out of. And in my opinion, that's what Utah football is doing a nice job of right now, right? Is they're taking guys that fit what they do, not necessarily guys who are just the best players on the board. It's the best value at that position at that point in time to help their roster produce wins. And sometimes it gets lost in the sense of college athletics because this money thing is so new. You can't just buy championships. There has to be actual data behind how you're building the roster. And if you get out over your skis and you start spending to buy wins, it turns into a Kentucky basketball situation where your roster is a little off and you spend $10 million above the market to do it, right? So, and I think they've learned. They did a much better job this year in building out their roster for probably a very similar price to what they spent last year in a doubled market. And they have, in my opinion, a much better, more balanced roster, right? So across the board in college sports, there's got to be a method to the madness, and I think that if you fall into the trap of just paying to pay, you're always going to lose in some way, form, or fashion. It's going to come back to haunt you. And listen, I always say this, and whether it's right, wrong, indifferent, these are taxpayer dollars. So at some point, someone has to answer for why we're spending X amount of dollars on certain players. And I don't think we're quite there yet in college sports. It hasn't been as brash as I think it's going to be here over the next 3 to 5 years. But you're going to have a lot more, I guess you'd say, transparency behind the curtain when it comes to how these dollars are being spent. Because at the end of the day, like I said, they're taxpayer dollars, and we're everyone in the ecosystem is here to make sure that the universities they're representing are competing for championships, and the individuals spending the money are going to have to be stewards of that money, spend it the right way. So it's going to be really intriguing. But like I said, there's pros and cons to each, and I'm kind of indifferent to it. It just depends. Like I think LSU is doing a great job. The marketing, the media behind what they're doing, it's a sexy place to play right now, and same with Ole Miss, right? Like it just is what it is, right? It's the same situation with basketball. There's probably 3 to 5 programs that have now become newfound, real demons on the recruiting trail because you found yourself in position to market yourself into recruiting some of the best players in the country. So just touching on that a little bit, that's where I see it, over the next 3 to 5 years trending.
What's your take on some of the legislation that they're trying to pass through to either corral what schools are doing? I mean, do you think that there's a chance of this stuff happening? And B, is it going to solve the actual problem that they think that they're trying to solve?
It's honestly, my mind changes on it every day because the legislation and the impact and these big bills that get pushed through the system, like every day the status on them changes. And I think that there is a world where something eventually passes. I think by the time it passes, it may be so watered down that it doesn't give us the impact that's needed to corral some of the issues that we're dealing with. I'm also a college sports hopeful, right? Like I'm a homer in a sense where I believe that if we put the right people at the table, not just a hodgepodge of big names, like we'd probably come up with a solution here and really dial in on what's best for college sports. And those conversations, like they need to be had. And I'm a big believer in like the government doesn't need to step in on this one. We need to actually figure out as a group how we're going to corral our own business. And when that day comes, I think it'll be one of the best days we've ever seen in college sports. And when there's uniformity across the board and athletic directors and university presidents have real buy-in and there's a group of people pushing the boat forward, I do think that you'll see real change. And I think you'd see an unbelievable product across the board.
Do you think that there's still risk of killing the golden goose here, of certain entities being so self-interested or chasing the larger media dollars or whatever? Can the Big Ten and the SEC find a way to serve their interests and help everybody else along? I mean, is there still a risk for things to kind of fall apart, or do you think that it's the ship's going to right itself, that the system's too big to fail, if you will?
I think it's a system that's, in my opinion, it's too big to fail. What it looks like when it does transition, though, I think is what everybody will either see as failure or a positive or a failure, right? So I do eventually think that those bigger conference schools are going to branch off and find themselves in their own scenario. I made a comment on Instagram the other day and just put out some content around this concept of we have rosters, right, like Texas, that are spending $40+ million, and Georgia, who have outright said like I was spending $40 million a year ago, right? So my question is, we keep talking about a salary cap. Okay, there's this constant like, hey, we need a salary cap. We need a salary cap. We need to restrict funding. We need to restrict spending and player earnings. To me, like that's a cop out. And I think that with where we're at in college sports, there needs to be an ante, right? Like everybody needs to be at the point of, hey, we're either going to play at a certain level or we're going to play against other teams. And that's where I do believe you're going to see the divide. And that's where the commissioners of the SEC and the Big Ten, in my opinion, that's where this lies. They have the ability to go spend. They have the ability to go do this at an elite level. They would much rather reap the reward when they're spending the money to do it than an ACC team who's not spending barely anything, who plays a week schedule and sneaks in the playoff, take a spot from one of their schools, right? So where is the floor in this whole thing? And I always say, like, let's let the big dogs compete against the big dogs. And if you want to be a part of that group, then you have to pay to get in, right? So if you're going to spend $40 million on your roster every year, then great, let's go. That's the minimum. Just like Major League Baseball, like those teams at the bottom of the barrel, they're not really competing, right? Most of the time, they're small market teams that are getting trampled unless they have a real strategic approach to the roster construction and the development of their players. So I think that there's a world where they're even talking about a salary cap at the end of the season, but they're also, with the salary cap, proposing a salary floor that would come with it. How do we increase the investment in college football and men's basketball to put everybody in a similar playing field where we don't have Just for example, we don't have I'm going to use an ACC analogy. We don't have Miami spending $43 million turning around to play Boston College on a Friday night in Coral Gables or at Hard Rock, and Boston College is spending 12, right? It doesn't make any sense for the sport. And that's where I think the rub is. And ultimately, I think that's where the divide's going to be made. I think that everybody's going to say, hey, if you're going to be a part of this upper level group, this upper echelon of college football and men's basketball, you're going to spend accordingly. And this is what it's going to look like. That, I think, would fix a lot of problems within itself. That a lot of the individuals having these conversations are not necessarily willing to have the conversation about, because it would increase the amount of money that's being spent across the board. It probably tick quite a few people off as you do it, but business is business at the end of the day.
I mean, look, and that makes sense. Do you think that there's when you're looking at things through that lens, do you think that there is a natural system that's built up that would prevent certain teams to do that kind of thing? So, like, look, we know BYU, they're spending money. We saw it with their class last year. We saw what they're doing with basketball. Utah, we've talked about it. They're strategic with how they spend. They're looking to your earlier point about that high value thing. But there's a big there's a big gap between what the Big 12 or the ACC schools are making versus like the SEC or the Big 10. So for those schools that are willing to go out and put money on the line, but because of that kind of gap, is there a way to bridge that? So if a Utah wanted to come to the table and meet that floor where a Boston College wouldn't, is there a way to get access to that, or do you just have to suck it up and find the money and buy your way in and do what Texas Tech is doing?
Yeah, a little bit of a double-edged sword. I think that it's reallocating funds within the university to support this marketing mecca that you have through athletics. The other piece of it is that there is a sacrifice from the SEC and Big Ten that can happen here. And there's a little bit of I wouldn't necessarily say an olive branch, but there's a conversation to be had about bringing more people to the table to consolidate on the media side, and then these television networks to basically force the hand and create a new opportunity. A lot of times people don't think about this. The networks have it golden right now. The schools they got to go afford all these players. They got to go pay. Like, once you bring the networks into the bigger conversation, I don't necessarily know that it's that pretty, and that's probably why we haven't had as much, like, this change may be happening a little faster if you got a little of that juice behind it. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, I think that there's, like I said, a couple different ways you could look at it. The school is going to have to put the money behind it and really get after it from a financial standpoint. And that sometimes is going to suck. I think a lot of schools are dealing with that right now, trying to figure out where they sacrifice to continue to support their two biggest programs at the highest level. And then there's also the aspect of, like, hey, there may be an olive branch here that needs to be extended to continue to do what's good for the greater group. So.
Love it. Shifting gears just a little bit, let's talk a little bit about recruiting. One of my favorite things that you do on social media is you'll do the this or that type of thing where you'll give a scenario of, would you rather be a starting kicker at Texas A&M for $300,000 or a starting running back at Northwestern for $45,000? And look, and I like that because, I mean, they look at things that way as well, right? About that total value of contract over time and opportunity and increasing your brand and that sort of thing. But when you're talking about recruiting, and I think that kind of plays into it, those types of decisions, the would you rathers, how much of this is, from your vantage point, is still about relationships versus the money, and maybe break that down, high school versus transfer portal, because they're very different animals.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that they're very different. High school and transfer portal recruiting are two totally insanely different beasts within themselves. In my opinion, on the high school side, we're getting a lot more money driven than it was in the past. A lot of times the money was what it was. It was driven by relationships, who knew which coach. And you still have to have that, right? Like, you still have to have the relationships to get you in the door, create the relationships, but the money has to be right. The money has to be competitive. You're not going to get kids if you're probably, I would say, 6 figures off, right? If you're 100,000 plus off, a lot of times guys are making decisions that are best for them and their family. So that's hard. It's a tough pill to swallow, and it makes it. I think a lot of coaches and quite frankly, a lot of GMs who have football backgrounds are a little salty about that, right? When you break it down on the transfer portal side, it is strictly, in my opinion, like there's a little bit of relationship there, but man, they're making business decisions. And guys are older in their career. On the football side, a lot of them are probably narrowing in on their last couple of years of playing, trying to maximize what they're able to get out of their body. On the basketball side, there's a little bit more of a fit aspect to it because guys do want to have success in a certain system or a role. And it's also smaller locker rooms. Like you want to be around the right people. It's a little bit more of an emotional decision. But at the end of the day, in basketball too, like it's money's money. And that's just the nature of where we are, right? Guys are making business decisions and doing what's best for them. And a lot of times they do have representation. I would say probably 90% of the time athletes are represented by agents. Real and agents are two real agents and NIL agents. We may argue that they're not the same thing. So, but at the end of the day, they are represented by someone who's pushing them in the direction of making what makes financial sense for them and their family moving forward in the future.
Knowing what you know now, let's say you're a high school football player, you're not like one of the top 4 or 5 star guys, but you've got a lot of good offers. If you had to choose between a school where you felt like there was a culture fit, where you felt there was opportunity, and a school that maybe was still had those things, maybe less so, but was offering you $75K more as a freshman, look, if it's you or if it's your kid, what's the better choice between the two, or is it just entirely dependent on the situation?
Yeah, it's entirely dependent on the situation. It's a really hard question to answer because there's so many variables that go into it. If you're early in your career, I'm always a big believer in go somewhere that's good for you right now. And I had this is a real life conversation, school in the Big 12, competing against a school in the ACC for a player. The fit in the Big 12 right now for them to get on the field, it's a better situation. And it's the same. It's a little bit less money, but at the end of the day, they're going to go play early, right? So their value is going to increase faster. And it's the same as college sports. How quickly can I get to my next contract? And when you get to your next contract, how much value do you have? And that is where college sports is headed, right? So if you can get on the field early, there's an opportunity for you to go play, and there's a real brand behind what you're doing, i.e. a Power 4 program. And you can go play and get on the field or get on the court. In my opinion, that's a good move because moving forward, your value is going to skyrocket. You're going to prove what you can do. And that school's either going to have to pay you or you're going to be able to go somewhere and have serious earning potential.
Love it. A couple more questions. The last one about just NIL in particular for you. With the way that things are now, with what you know about Utah, why should Utah fans be excited about the state of college sports and the potential for Utah football the way things are right now?
Reframe that one for me.
So I think that I'm glad that you asked. On our message boards in particular, we see a lot of conversations about people getting frustrated with NIL, that it's changed since the good old days, and that's to be expected. Or people worried about, can Utah afford to spend, or how do you keep up with a Texas Tech, or if a BYU wants a guy, they'll go out and spend for him. That where Utah has the money, but maybe isn't willing to spend for it because they want to pay the guys that have produced. So in that kind of a scenario, if you're just general Joe average Utah fan and you're worried about the future of college sports, and so it may be even beyond just Utah specifically, but why should they be excited about college sports in the NIL era? And why should they have optimism that the experience is going to be good? There's going to be an opportunity to compete.
That's a great question. It's really hard for the average fan to be excited about college sports right now. But what I will tell you is that if y'all win, it's going to be a lot of fun. And that's the hope that you ride on. And that's the fundraiser in me, is like, I'm selling a vision. I'm selling a hope. And there's no feeling like it, right? Like there's times where you get that, like professional sports. Yeah, it's fun, but there's still no emotion like your team having a pick six, the uncertainty of college football, the uncertainty of college basketball when you've got 3 seconds left and you score 6 points to win a game because they're 18 to 22-year-old kids. Like, it is still an electric environment with your community and people who all share the same vision and love for a place that is dear to your heart, right? And that's what drives college athletics to begin with, is the emotion behind it, the actual true attachment to the program. Your parents went there, your relatives went there, your cousins go there, your kids go to school there. That's what this is all about, and that's why college sports are great. We can all sit here and be like, oh, yeah, well, probably the closest connection you can have to a professional sports team would be to say, hey, I have Broncos tickets, so I care about it. But did you play for them? Did your cousin work for them? Did your grandparents have those tickets? Like, what's the actual relationship and emotion behind what drives the fandom of college sports? And that's what it's all about. So if you're the average fan, I would tell you to get over the edge, man. Like, go have some fun, enjoy every bit of it, because this era, it doesn't last forever. Right now, in this current point in time, Utah has a serious opportunity to capitalize on the opportunity to win, right? So nobody is an outlier. If we start talking about facilities again and the biggest schools and the coaches and the brands and the blue bloods, it becomes that much more difficult, right? So enjoy it. Enjoy the craziness of the ride. There's going to be ups and downs. Basketball will be back sooner than later. Football is going to continue to roll. And you guys have a really fun future ahead of you. So get over the hump and invest in college sports, because it's only going to get crazier from here. And I think you're going to want to be a part of it when it really ramps up.
Dan, I'm a buyer, and frankly, I couldn't have scripted that better from you. One of the big themes on our board is hashtag team fun. We do this because it's fun. And winning is fun. And you're right. College sports is fun, even with NIL.
No question. It's sometimes a lot of people, they get drained by the taglines on ESPN. Like, think about it, man. How many of those are actually real a year? Like, Darian Mensah gets paid $10+ million to go to Miami. Okay, that's one guy, right? Like, everything else, man, it's competitive. It's awesome to watch. Has the Big 12 been this competitive across the board? And I would say no. There's schools coming out of the woodworks. You got new coaches places. You've got coaches going from the Big 12 to the Big 10 in the middle of nowhere. They're like, it don't make a whole lot of sense, but hey, man, that's the beauty of the beast. It's there's literally zero predictability in any of this, and that's what I love about it. It becomes a real blast.
I love it. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. Fascinating conversation. We could probably talk for hours over beers on this thing.
No question. We'll have to make that happen sooner than later. I'd love to have a beer with some Utah fans, man. Let's go.
If you're ever in Salt Lake City, hit me up. It's my treat. Drinks are on me. In the meantime, where can people find you? And if you're offering anything that people can sign up for, would love to hear about it.
No, I love it. Jump along for the journey, man. I'm growing on the content side, and I really want to provide parents, players, administrators, athletic directors, everybody across the board, a real understanding of what's going on in the market. And it's been a blast to take it from 2,000 followers to now nearly 25,000, and we're continuing to grow. The goal is to be at 100,000. So go hit follow on Instagram at Daniel Furman 4. And then at Dan_Furman on X. So I appreciate everybody's support. And if any of you ever tagging me or asking questions, I love to interact. So I hope to hear from you all soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Right,
fans, big conversation on NIL. Hit us up if you have questions. Make sure you give Dan a follow. And thanks for listening. As always, point those cannons south. We'll talk to you next week.
Appreciate you guys, man. Go Utes, huh?